The dust from the approaching stagecoach had been visible for nearly an hour before it finally rattled into Columbia, Missouri, in the spring of 1871. Deborah O'Malley clutched her single valise with white knuckles, her stomach churning with a mixture of dread and desperate hope as she stared out the window at what would be her new home. This wasn't what she had pictured when she'd answered the advertisement back in Boston, but after her parents' deaths and the subsequent loss of their home, she'd had precious few options. End of the line, folks. The driver called out as the stagecoach jolted to a stop in front of the town's modest general store. Columbia, Missouri. Deborah gathered her skirts and stepped down carefully, blinking in the bright sunlight. The journey had been long and arduous, nearly 3 weeks of travel by rail and stagecoach. Her back ached, her dress was hopelessly wrinkled, and she felt far from the presentable bride she had hoped to be upon arrival. She scanned the small gathering of people, searching for the man who had sent for her. Nathan Jamison. She had his tintype in her pocket, a serious-faced man with dark eyes and a full beard. The letters they'd exchanged over the past 6 months had been brief but promising. He owned a cattle ranch outside of town and needed a wife to help manage the household. She needed security and a fresh start, but as the other passengers dispersed, there was no sign of Nathan Jamison. Miss O'Malley. Deborah turned to find an older woman approaching her, gray hair tucked neatly beneath a bonnet. "Yes, that's me," Deborah replied, trying to keep the worry from her voice. "I'm Martha Wilson. I run the boarding house here in Columbia," the woman said with a kind smile. "Mr. Jamison asked me to meet you and bring you to town. He's been delayed by some trouble with his herd, but he'll be in tomorrow to fetch you." Relief washed over Deborah. "Oh, I see. Thank you for the welcome, Mrs. Wilson. Come along, dear." "You must be exhausted," Martha said, taking Deborah's valise. "We'll get you settled in for the night." The boarding house was simple but clean, a 2-story wooden structure with a wide porch. Inside, Martha showed Deborah to a small room with a narrow bed, washstand, and chest of drawers. "Supper's at 6, Martha informed her. "There's fresh water in the pitcher if you'd like to wash up." Left alone, Deborah sank onto the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. The weight of her decision pressed down on her shoulders. She was 23 years old, alone in a strange town, about to marry a man she'd never met. What had she gotten herself into? She pulled out Nathan Jamison's tintype and studied it once more, searching for reassurance in those serious eyes. "Please be a good man," she whispered. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Deborah rose early, dressed in her best blue dress, and carefully arranged her chestnut hair. She'd hardly touched her breakfast, too nervous to eat, when Martha appeared in the doorway of the dining room. "He's here," the older woman announced with a smile. Deborah's heart raced as she followed Martha onto the porch. A tall man in a dusty hat was tying his horse to the hitching post. When he turned, Deborah recognized him immediately from the tintype, though in person he appeared younger and less severe. Nathan Jamison removed his hat as he approached, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his eyes were a warm brown that crinkled at the corners when he smiled tentatively at her. "Miss O'Malley," he said, his voice deep and pleasant. "I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." "It was long but uneventful, Mr. Jamison," she replied, meeting his gaze. "Thank you for arranging everything." An awkward silence fell between them, 2 strangers contemplating a lifetime together. "I've brought the wagon," Nathan finally said, gesturing to a serviceable buckboard behind his horse. "The ranch is about 10 miles out of town. I thought we might stop at the church on the way if that suits you. Pastor Miller can perform the ceremony." The reality of her situation hit Deborah anew. "Today?" she asked, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. Nathan's expression faltered. "I assumed that was the plan, but if you need more time, no," Deborah said quickly, gathering her courage. "Today is fine." In truth, she had nowhere else to go, and the sooner they were married, the sooner she could begin building this new life she'd committed to. Besides, something in Nathan's direct gaze reassured her. After thanking Martha for her hospitality, Deborah found herself seated beside Nathan in the wagon, her valise tucked safely behind them. As they pulled away from the boarding house, he spoke again. "I want to be honest with you, Miss O'Malley. The ranch isn't grand. It's a working cattle operation and the house is simple, but it's solid and there's room to grow." "I didn't come expecting luxury, Mr. Jamison," Deborah replied. "I came expecting honest work and a new start." He nodded, seeming pleased with her answer. "Then I think we'll get along just fine." The ceremony at the small white church was brief and matter-of-fact. Pastor Miller, a jovial man with spectacles perched on his nose, seemed to sense their nervousness and kept things simple. Deborah spoke her vows clearly, despite the trembling in her hands as Nathan slipped a plain gold band onto her finger. "You may kiss your bride," Pastor Miller announced, and Nathan leaned forward to place a gentle, chaste kiss on Deborah's lips. Just like that, she was Mrs. Jamison. Back in the wagon, continuing toward the ranch, the air between them felt different. They were no longer two strangers with an agreement, but husband and wife, bound by law and promise. "Tell me about your family," Nathan said as they traveled, the wagon bumping along the rutted trail. Deborah stared at the passing landscape, the rolling prairie dotted with stands of trees. "My father was a bookkeeper. He and my mother both died of influenza 2 years ago. I have a younger sister who's married in Philadelphia." "I'm sorry for your loss," Nathan said quietly. "And your family?" Deborah asked, turning the conversation away from her grief. "My father brought us west from Virginia after the war. He and my mother are still on their homestead in Kansas. I have 2 brothers there as well," Nathan explained. "I came to Missouri 5 years ago to start my own place." As they traveled, the landscape began to change, with more trees and gently rolling hills. After nearly 2 hours of travel, Nathan pointed ahead to where the trail dipped down into a shallow valley. "That's the ranch," he said. "It's not much to look at yet, but the land is good." Deborah could see a modest cabin set against a backdrop of trees, with a barn and corral nearby. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance, cattle grazed on the green spring grass. "It looks peaceful," she said, and meant it. Nathan smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "It is, most days." As they approached the final stretch of road leading down to the ranch, Nathan slowed the wagon. "We need to be careful through here," he explained. "The spring rains have been heavy this year, and this section of road gets soft." Deborah nodded, noticing how the wagon wheels sank deeper into the mud as they proceeded. Nathan guided the horses carefully, keeping to what appeared to be the firmer parts of the trail. They were nearly at the bottom of the slope when Deborah felt a strange shift beneath them. The wagon tilted suddenly to one side. "Nathan!" she cried out, alarmed. "Whoa!" Nathan called to the horses, pulling hard on the reins. "Something's not right." He jumped down from the wagon and immediately sank ankle-deep in mud. Circling around to Deborah's side, he offered his hand. "Better get down from there. I think we've hit a bad spot." Deborah took his hand and stepped down carefully, but as her feet touched the ground, she felt the earth shift beneath her. Before either of them could react, the ground under her feet simply collapsed, and she was falling. A scream tore from her throat as she plunged downward, mud and water rushing around her. She landed with a splash in cold, murky water that came up to her waist. Looking up, she could see the edge of what appeared to be a sinkhole about 8 feet above her head. Panic seized her as she realized she was trapped in a pocket of water beneath the road. "Nathan!" she cried out, fighting to keep her footing in the slippery mud. His face appeared at the edge of the hole, eyes wide with alarm. "Deborah, are you hurt?" "No, but I can't climb out. The sides are too steep and slippery." The walls of the sinkhole were sheer mud, offering no handholds. "Hold on," Nathan called down. "I'll get you out." He disappeared from view, and Deborah fought to control her terror. The water was cold, and she could feel her heavy skirts dragging her down. She found a small ledge of harder soil to stand on, but it was slippery and unstable. Minutes later, Nathan reappeared above. "I'm going to throw down a rope. My Reata, try to catch it and tie it around yourself." Deborah watched as he expertly twirled the long, braided leather rope, then cast it down into the hole. The loop at the end splashed into the water near her. She lunged for it, nearly slipping off her precarious foothold, but managed to grab the rope. "I've got it," she called up. "Good. Now put it under your arms and make a knot if you can." With trembling fingers, Deborah looped the rope around her chest, securing it as best she could. "Ready." Above, Nathan had wrapped the other end of the Reata around his waist and was bracing himself in the mud, legs spread wide for stability. "Hold tight. I'm going to pull you up." Deborah felt the rope go taut, and then she was being lifted slowly upward. The mud sucked at her skirts, making her heavier, but inch by inch she rose toward the surface. She could see Nathan straining above, his boots digging deep into the mud as he hauled on the rope with all his strength. As she neared the top, the edge of the sinkhole crumbled slightly, sending a shower of dirt down upon her. For a heart-stopping moment, she feared they would both be dragged into the pit. "Almost there," Nathan grunted, taking a step backward and pulling with renewed force. With one final heave, he pulled her up and over the edge. Momentum sent them both tumbling backward into the mud. Nathan quickly unwrapped the rope from around his waist and helped Deborah to more stable ground. They sat there for a moment, both breathing heavily, covered in mud from head to toe. Deborah's blue dress was ruined, soaked, and filthy, her hair plastered to her face with mud. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, his voice tight with concern. A slightly hysterical laugh bubbled up from Deborah's chest. "This isn't exactly how I imagined my wedding day." For a moment, Nathan stared at her in shock, and then he too began to laugh, the tension breaking between them like a dam giving way. Soon they were both laughing uncontrollably, the absurdity of their situation overwhelming in the wake of fear. When their laughter finally subsided, Nathan helped Deborah to her feet. "Welcome to Missouri, Mrs. Jamison. Is it always this exciting?" she asked, trying to wipe some of the mud from her face. "Only on special occasions," he replied with a grin that transformed his serious face. They managed to guide the wagon around the sinkhole, taking a wider path down to the ranch. As they approached the cabin, Deborah felt a strange mix of emotions. Her wedding day had certainly not gone as planned, but something had changed between them in those frightening moments. The shared danger and laughter had broken through the awkwardness, giving them a connection that might have taken weeks to develop otherwise. The cabin was indeed simple, as Nathan had warned: a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and 2 rooms in the back. But it was clean and solidly built, with windows that let in plenty of light. "I'll bring in water for you to wash up," Nathan said, setting down her valise. "And I'll see if I can find something for you to wear while your dress dries." Deborah nodded gratefully, suddenly aware of how she must look and smell. Left alone, she surveyed what was now her home. There were few personal touches: a bookshelf with a handful of volumes, a rocking chair by the fireplace, a simple wooden table with 4 chairs. It was the home of a man who had been living alone, focused on work rather than comfort. She could change that, she thought. She could make this a real home. When Nathan returned with buckets of water, he also brought a folded shirt and pair of trousers. "These will be too big, but they're clean. I'll wait outside while you get changed." Alone again, Deborah stripped off her ruined dress and undergarments, using the water to wash away the worst of the mud. Nathan's shirt hung almost to her knees, and she had to roll the trousers up several times, but they were dry and clean. She combed the mud from her hair as best she could and braided it loosely. When she opened the door, Nathan was waiting on the porch. He too had changed, and his hair was damp from washing. "Better?" he asked with a small smile. "Much," she replied. "Thank you for the clothes." An awkward silence fell between them again, the reality of their situation settling back in. They were strangers, yet married. This was their wedding night, yet they barely knew each other's names a day ago. "I should check on the horses," Nathan said finally, breaking the silence. "And then I'll show you around the place." The rest of the afternoon passed in a tour of the ranch. Nathan showed her the barn, the chicken coop, the vegetable garden he'd started, and the spring house where they kept milk and butter cool. As the sun began to set, they returned to the cabin, both acutely aware of the night ahead. Nathan built up the fire while Deborah found supplies to make a simple meal. They worked in companionable silence, establishing a natural rhythm that surprised them both. Over supper, the conversation flowed more easily as Nathan told her about the ranch and his plans for expanding the herd. "I want to build a bigger house eventually," he said, glancing around the cabin. "Something with more rooms for the future." Deborah understood his meaning and felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "This is fine for now," she assured him. "We have time." When they had finished eating and cleaned up, the inevitable moment could no longer be postponed. Nathan cleared his throat. "The bedroom is yours," he said, gesturing to the larger of the 2 back rooms. "I'll take the other room. It's small, but I can make it work." Deborah stared at him in surprise. "But we're married." "Yes, but—" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't expect. That is, I know this arrangement was made out of necessity for both of us. I won't hold you to obligations until you're ready." His consideration touched her deeply. This man, who had pulled her from a sinkhole just hours after their wedding, was now offering her time and space to adjust to their marriage. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate that more than I can say." Relief washed over Nathan's face. "Good night, then, Mrs. Jamison." "Good night, Mr. Jamison," she replied with a small smile. As Deborah lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie night, she thought about the man sleeping in the next room. He was nothing like she had imagined from his letters and tintype. He was stronger, kinder, and far more thoughtful. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt a flicker of hope that this arrangement might grow into something more than mere convenience. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm as Deborah learned the routines of ranch life. She took over the household tasks, making improvements to the cabin's organization, and adding small touches to make it more homelike. Nathan taught her about caring for the chickens and tending the garden, and she surprised him with her willingness to learn and her quick adaptability. Each night, they retired to separate rooms, but each day, the ease between them grew. They shared meals and conversation, gradually revealing more about themselves to each other. Deborah learned that Nathan had fought briefly for the Union at the end of the war, that he loved to read history books on winter evenings, and that he had an unexpected talent for whittling. Nathan discovered that Deborah had a beautiful singing voice, that she could recite poetry from memory, and that, despite her city upbringing, She was determined to master every aspect of ranch life. One afternoon, about a month after her arrival, Deborah was hanging laundry on the line when she spotted Nathan returning early from checking the herd. Something about his posture made her pause. He was slumped forward in the saddle, one hand pressed to his side. She dropped the wet shirt she was holding and ran to meet him as he dismounted unsteadily from his horse. "What happened?" she asked, alarmed by the paleness of his face. "Got thrown," Nathan admitted with a grimace. "Horse spooked at a snake. Think I might have cracked a rib." Deborah slipped under his arm to support him. "Let's get you inside." In the cabin, she helped him to a chair and carefully unbuttoned his shirt. An ugly purple bruise was spreading across his right side. Gently, she probed the area, making him wince. "Nothing seems out of place," she said. "But you need to rest. I'll wrap it for you." As she tended to his injury, binding strips of clean cloth tightly around his torso, Nathan watched her face, so intent on her task. "You're good at this," he commented. "My father was often ill in his last years," Deborah explained. "I learned a lot about caring for the sick." When she had finished, their eyes met, and something passed between them, a current of awareness that had been building slowly over the weeks. Nathan lifted a hand to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather-light. "Thank you," he said softly. Deborah felt her heart quicken. "You should rest," she murmured, stepping back. That evening she insisted that Nathan take the larger bed to recover while she would sleep in the small room. After some protest, he agreed, but as she turned to leave his room after helping him settle, he caught her hand. "Deborah," he said, using her given name for the first time since their wedding day. "I want you to know that I'm glad it was you who answered my advertisement." A warm glow spread through her chest. "So am I," she replied honestly. The next few days were a turning point in their relationship. With Nathan confined mostly to the house while his injury healed, they spent more time together. Deborah took over many of his daily chores, learning to ride better in the process, and in the evenings, they sat by the fire talking long into the night. "Tell me about Boston," Nathan requested one evening as they shared the last of the apple pie Deborah had baked. "It's nothing like this," she said, gesturing to the vast openness outside their window. "The streets are narrow and crowded, buildings pressed so close together you can barely see the sky. But there's music and theater, and shops filled with goods from all over the world. Do you miss it?" He asked, studying her face. Deborah considered the question seriously. "I miss certain things. The bookshops, the public gardens in spring, but not as much as I expected to." She looked around the cabin that had become home in such a short time. "There's a different kind of beauty here." "And a different kind of hardship," Nathan added. "Yes," she agreed, thinking of the sinkhole, the long days of physical labor, the isolation. "But also a different kind of freedom." Nathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's why I came west, to build something of my own on my own terms." "Is it what you hoped for?" she asked. "Almost," he said, his gaze holding hers with unexpected intensity. "It's getting closer every day." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Deborah's breath caught in her throat as Nathan leaned toward her, his intention clear in his eyes. Then he hesitated, giving her the chance to pull away. Instead, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss, far different from the brief, formal one they had shared at their wedding. This kiss was exploration and promise, a beginning rather than an obligation. When they broke apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't expect this," he confessed. "When I sent for a bride, I thought it would be a practical arrangement. I never imagined I could feel this way." "Neither did I," Deborah admitted, "but I'm glad we were both wrong." That night, for the first time, they shared the larger bed. though Nathan's injury limited them to holding each other close as they drifted off to sleep. But it was enough a threshold crossed, a new intimacy established. As spring turned to summer, their relationship blossomed like the wildflowers that covered the prairie. The separate rooms were abandoned, and they settled into a partnership that grew stronger each day. Nathan recovered fully and taught Deborah to ride better, to shoot a rifle for protection, and the basics of cattle ranching. In return, she transformed the cabin into a true home, started a larger garden, and surprised him with her aptitude for keeping the ranch accounts in meticulous order. On a warm evening in late August, they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Nathan's arm was around Deborah's shoulders, and her head rested comfortably against him. "I received a letter from my sister today," Deborah said. "She's expecting her second child in winter." "That's wonderful news," Nathan replied. "You miss her, don't you?" "Yes," Deborah admitted, "though less than before. I have so much here now." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I've been thinking about that bigger house. The herd is doing well, and I've saved enough to start building before winter." Deborah turned to look at him. "Really? That would be wonderful." "I thought 3 bedrooms," Nathan continued, a slight flush rising to his cheeks. "For the future." Understanding dawned on Deborah, and she felt a surge of joy. "3 sounds perfect," she agreed, leaning up to kiss him softly. Nathan pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. When they parted, he touched her cheek gently. "I never thought I could be this happy," he confessed. "When I sent for a mail-order bride, I was looking for a practical arrangement. Someone to help with the ranch, to cook and clean, maybe eventually to mother children. I never expected to fall in love." "Neither did I," Deborah replied honestly. "I was running away from a life that had fallen apart. I hoped for security, respect, maybe friendship in time. Love seemed too much to ask for." "And now?" Nathan asked, his eyes searching hers. "Now I can't imagine my life without you," she said simply. As autumn painted the prairie in golds and russets, construction began on the new house. Nathan hired men from Colombia to help with the building, and by Christmas, the framework was complete. They celebrated the holiday in their cabin one last time, exchanging simple gifts by firelight. Nathan gave Deborah a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For recording our life together," he explained. Deborah gave Nathan a hand-knitted scarf and a surprise announcement. "I think we'll need that 3rd bedroom sooner than we planned," she told him with a shy smile. "Around next summer, I expect." The joy that lit Nathan's face was all the confirmation Deborah needed that their unconventional beginning had led to exactly where they were meant to be. By spring of 1872, they moved into the new house, a solid 2-story structure with a wide porch and plenty of room to grow. Nathan's herd had expanded, and they were beginning to prosper. In July, their son was born, Daniel Nathan Jamison, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's determined spirit. Standing on the porch of their new home, Deborah often thought back to that day nearly a year and a half ago when she'd fallen into the sinkhole. What had seemed like disaster had actually been the beginning of everything good in her life. Nathan's strength and quick thinking had saved her that day, but it was his kindness and patience in the days that followed that had truly captured her heart. 5 years after Deborah stepped off the stagecoach in Columbia, the Jamison Ranch was one of the most prosperous in the county. The house had expanded again to accommodate their growing family. Daniel had been joined by a sister, Emma, and another baby was on the way. Nathan had hired hands to help with the ranch work, and Deborah had started a small school for the children of neighboring ranches. On the anniversary of their wedding day, Nathan always presented Deborah with a small carved figure, a tradition he had begun on their first anniversary. This year, It was a detailed carving of their family, standing together in front of their home. "To think it all started with a sinkhole and a Reata," Deborah said as she admired the carving. "And a woman brave enough to marry a stranger and start a new life," Nathan added, pulling her close. "I'd fall into 100 sinkholes if they all led me here," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. And in the warm evening light, with their children playing nearby and their home solid beneath their feet, they both knew that some journeys, no matter how difficult their beginnings, led exactly where they were meant to.